Welcome to the Dan Sports Tips NFL DraftKings preview show for week 7 of the NFL season. I will be taking a look at everything you need for your daily fantasy games on DraftKings this week. I'll be looking at stacks of the day, both offensive and defensive, and players that can be used at other positions. For anyone that hasn't had the opportunity to sign up and play daily fantasy sports with DraftKings yet, I will put a link in the description of this video that will enable you to do that today. I'm going to jump straight into the show looking at our offensive stacks this week. I'll start with the Washington Redskins quarterback Kirk Cousins for 5,900, wide receiver Jamison Crowder for 4,300. The Detroit Lions defense has been dreadful. It ranks 31st against the pass in DVOA, the Football Outsiders metric, with Jordan Reed on the shelf with a concussion. Deshaun Jackson has an injured shoulder. Then Crowder, who often lines up in the slot and runs routes in the middle of the field, an area that the Lions defense does struggle to cover with any consistency at all. He could well be primed for a big day this weekend. I would use Deshaun Jackson as well if I know he's going to play, so obviously do check the inactives on Sunday, see if he's there, because he does have upside if on the field in this game. The concern obviously will always be that he's out there not healthy as a decoy to run the deep route and clear out space underneath for the likes of Vernon Davis and Jamison Crowder to exploit the soft coverage that will be provided by the Lions. But I do like Cousins and Crowder to link up a lot in what looks like a shootout to me this weekend. The Baltimore Ravens, quarterback Joe Flacco for 5,800 and wide receiver Mike Wallace for the same price of 5,800. Flacco is listed as questionable for the game. I do think it's highly unlikely he doesn't make this start. Baltimore don't have the best passing attack in the NFL. Does rank only 26th in DVOA. They obviously have just changed offensive coordinator Jettison Mark Trestman. They are apparently going to run more, but they face a Jets secondary that's been truly awful. The Jets come in ranked dead last in passing defense by the same metric DVOA. They've struggled defending the deep ball all year, and they do defend the run well. This is not a game where Baltimore are going to experience much success on the ground. Throwing is going to be the way to go. Wallace is that deep threat. Unfortunately for the Jets, as I say, with their strong run defense, it forces them to pass and take advantage of that secondary. Steve Smith is going to be out for this game in all probability. He is listed as doubtful. Then the targets will be there on the true deep threat receiver in Mike Wallace. He's had an average of 10 targets per game in the last 3 games. It does feel like a risky enough stack. Should be pretty good for tournaments. If you want to take the risk a little bit more extreme, try quarterback Joe Flacco for 5,800 and wide receiver Brashard Perriman for 3,500. Perriman missed the entirety of his rookie year with injury. He could see an increased workload in the absence of Steve Smith. Kamar Aiken is listed higher than him on the depth chart. That was also the same last week when Aiken did get the start opposite of Wallace. Perriman, however, did see the 3rd most targets on the team that week in Smith's absence, behind Mike Wallace and tight end Dennis Pitta. He does need to up his ratio of catches per target, but he did have a season-high 41-yard reception last week, has shown flashes of potential at various points throughout the season, and against this secondary, there is potential for a breakout, but it is a real lottery ticket, low floor, high ceiling pick, stacking Perriman with Flacco. The New England Patriots quarterback Tom Brady for 7,900 and tight end Rob Gronkowski for 7,200 is going to be the premium stack of the week, both in terms of total cost and that it involves paying up at one of the cheaper positions in tight end. It's worthwhile because the Patriots do go on the road to a fellow contender who they usually dominate. They'll be without their and obviously the Steelers will be without their starting QB this week. Brady and Gronk hooked up in full effect for the first time last season. Gronk catching 7 for 162 and a touchdown. Brady throwing for 376 yards and 3 touchdowns and logging 30 points against the Bengals defense that does rank 24th against the pass by DVOA. Pittsburgh themselves rank 21st. That's not a whole lot different. I expect Brady and Gronkowski to combine for another big day this week. And then for this sort of sneaky lottery ticket stack of the week, the Buffalo Bills. Quarterback Tyrod Taylor for 5,500, wide receiver Justin Hunt for 3,000. As I say, this is sneaky under the radar. It's going to be, I'm convinced it will be low owned. With Sammy Watkins on IR, Robert Woods listed as doubtful, there could be a lot of targets for Hunter, not only in the red zone where in 2 weeks on the team he's developed already into the main threat on the team due to his size, but also regular play up and down the field between the 20s. He caught one of his 2 targets last week, but the Bills, who do run the ball efficiently, will have to throw the ball to keep the Dolphins defence honest. The Dolphins defence against the pass is at best average. Taylor does add upside with his rushing yards in this stack as well, having had a single run of over 20 yards in 3 of his last 4 games. He had over 60 rushing yards last week. If you want to take a tournament flyer, you could do worse than this stack, and at a combined cost of only $8,500, it gives you a lot of money left over to spend on having a super strong rest of your lineup as well. Couple of defensive stacks this week. Running back Jacquizz Rodgers for $4,300 and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers defense and special teams for $3,200. Rodgers looked good in for Doug Martin and the now injured Charles Sims last week. With the setback for Martin, he looks to have the gig again this week against the 49ers unit that has struggled mightily against the run and also allows more opportunities on offense due to their up-tempo offense that they run themselves. The Bucs are built to stop the run and force you to pass, which does look a weakness for Kaepernick on what we saw last week. As the 49ers' preference is to run. Carlos Hyde is not going to be playing in this game. I'm unsure how the 49ers are going to move the ball. Rodgers looks set for another big day, fresh off of 35 touches in the last game. And running back Jeremy Hill for $4,000 and the Cincinnati Bengals defense and special teams for $3,600. Hill is often a disappointment but he is a running back capable of having a big game as well. Very much a lottery ticket, high risk, high reward play when he goes off. See Denver in week 3, 50 yards, 2 touchdowns for 21 fantasy points. He can provide excellent value. And a matchup with Cleveland, 19th against the run, in a game at home that the Bengals are expected to win, could see plenty of 4th quarter touches to run out the clock. The Bengals defense is a historically solid unit that's underperformed, but with a rookie quarterback on the road in a divisional game, that should make the eyes of this defense light up. They look a worthy play against Kessler and the Browns, who do lack legit weapons at this point past Terrell Pryor. Other quarterbacks we can use this week: Philip Rivers of the San Diego Chargers for $6,500. Rivers will single-handedly drag his team close in any game he plays with whatever people the Chargers manage to put in a uniform on the field with him. San Diego have not been beaten by more than 6 this year. They always play close. Rivers will have to work hard to keep up with one of the best offenses in the league in the Atlanta Falcons. Fortunately for him, the Falcons' defense is fairly soft, and the Denver game ended a run of 3 straight 300-yard passing games for Rivers. Understandable both because it was the Broncos and because the Chargers won that game, having had a big lead at the half, so they weren't going to be throwing the ball as much in the second half. Going into Atlanta, he will have to sling it around for success, and he looks a rock-solid play at quarterback this week. An awful lot of running backs I like the look of this week. I'll start with DeMarco Murray of the Tennessee Titans for $7,200. It's almost a perfect spot this week for Murray and the Titans. Tennessee are on record as stating their desire to play smash-mouth, old-fashioned running football, controlling the clock, and a matchup with the 32nd rush defence if the Indianapolis Colts, according to DVOA, will enable them to play such a game with Murray, who averages 4.6 yards per carry on this year, with a substantial workload to this point. Looks an absolute rock-solid, bomb-proof play at running back. Theo Riddick of the Detroit Lions for $5,200. Detroit and Washington looks like a shootout. However, the soft part of this Redskins defense is the underbelly and the linebackers. It's tough to throw on their excellent corner rotation. Riddick has nothing in his way to the main role as a 3-down running back. He does catch passes very well. With injuries to Abdullah and Washington, that's going to continue this week. He has a fairly pedestrian 3.4 yards per carry, but there will be volume here in the running game as well. And if it does develop into a track meet, being the receiving option out of the backfield for the Lions is also going to help as well. And Riddick looks set for a reasonable day in this matchup. Running back LaShawn McCoy of Buffalo for $7,600. Or running back Mike Gillislee of Buffalo for $3,000. Same sort of thing's going to apply here, so I'm going to lump them in together. We almost don't want Shady to play in this game, though. He's listed, he's going to be a game-time decision for Buffalo against the Miami Dolphins defence that ranks 24th in DVOA against the run. Buffalo have been creating holes for the running backs at the line. McCoy has feasted for a few weeks now. They've got the second-ranked rushing offence per DVOA, and Gillislee will adopt the starter's role in all likelihood if McCoy cannot go. LaShawn McCoy has averaged 5.6 yards per carry behind this line this season and has exceeded 20 points in each of his last 4 games, topping out at 36 last week with the 3-touchdown performance. Gillislee himself himself has touchdowns in back-to-back games, has averaged 6.9 yards per carry in relief of McCoy. While that's unsustainable for a full game, it does show that it's the line that is producing holes for the backs, and Gillislee will be just as serviceable if McCoy can't go in this game at a really cheap price. Spencer Ware of the Kansas City Chiefs for 5,800. The knee injury that saw Jamal Charles limited in practice on Friday could have a large bearing on this matchup, as they're not going to take a risk on a player like Charles, particularly with his history of injuries to his knees. The matchup with the Saints is a soft one. They rank 30th against the run, and we've seen this year that Spencer Ware is capable of managing the workload and carrying the rock for the Chiefs. I fully expect fairly minimal participation from Chiefs in this game, despite what coach Andy Reid says, and I think Spencer Ware's got massive upside at a fairly reasonable price for a running back this week as well. Melvin Gordon of the San Diego Chargers for 6,400. Gordon is not efficient, but he does get volume as a 3-down back due to the others in this backfield falling by the wayside and going on IR throughout this year. He has developed a taste for the end zone this year, having failed to find it once in his rookie year. Gordon has collected just a single 100-yard game this year against the Jacksonville Jaguars, despite a large workload, due to his pedestrian 3.4 yards per carry. The Jags do rank 27th against the run. The Falcons, the opponent this week, ranked 22nd, so it's in the same vicinity. Gordon looks certain in terms of production for cash. The upside's a touch low for me if you're thinking of using him in tournaments, but I think if you're playing cash, Gordon's probably very worth plugging into your lineups. And finally, at running back, James White of the New England Patriots for 4,600. The receiving back in New England always offers production. White's filling that role nicely in the absence of Dion Lewis, who remains on IR. White is used often in the red zone. His targets have increased each game since Tom Brady returned into this lineup, culminating in 2 touchdowns on 9 targets last week, as well as 7 carries, spelling LeGarrette Blount for 26 fantasy points. He's a solid play for cash games, but he does also represent some upside in tournament play as well, as New England go to Pittsburgh this week. Looking at my wide receivers, Alan Hearns of the Jacksonville Jaguars for $5,000. Hearns received 11 targets last week, and in a game that has points written all over it against the Raiders defence that ranks bottom 5 against the pass, could well have the opportunity, along with fellow wideout Allen Robinson, to have a big day. Oakland are generally worse statistically against the team's number 2 wide receiver though, and with the savings made taking Hearns over Robinson, you are enabled to go premium elsewhere, and you'll have the bonus that I think Hearns will be much lower owned than Robinson in your lineups. Hearns has made it to double digits every game bar 1 this season, and this is the matchup that presents the most upside for the Jaguars so far. It would be nice to get 4 quarters from Blake Bortles, who statistically has started slowly in every game this year, and that's why I've not put a Jaguars stack up. I'd just rather put Hearns in there, because you need the full 4-quarter production from the quarterback as well if we're going to get a stack, and I think he's got the lowest quarterback rating in the first quarter, and the Jags have started slow in every single game. AJ Green of the Cincinnati Bengals for 8,600. Green's got a nice matchup against the Browns. They rank 30th against the pass this year. Green is an elite receiver who has produced in spite of the Bengals' occasional offensive struggles this year and an occasional inability for the Bengals to put points on the board. Andy Dalton has not been the same quarterback this year since Hugh Jackson left town, but Green is still elite. He's logged 2 performances against weak pass defences this year of over 30 points. Of his lesser games, one against Pittsburgh was in terrible weather, another against Denver. They're a top-level pass defence, and those can be excused. Dalton himself had a terrible performance against the Cowboys a couple of weeks ago, so I'm not really going to blame AJ Green for that either. The only performance of his where he hasn't put up numbers that I'd question is against the New England Patriots, where potentially he should have performed better. However, this now, a week later, is an ideal bounce-back game. I wouldn't be shocked to see a score in the region of 35 against the Browns defence for AJ Green this week. Again, I'm not going to stack due to the Andy Dalton concerns, and I think Dalton's price is a little high for my tastes this week, but AJ Green for 8,600 looks a premier play at wide receiver this week. Stephon Diggs of the Minnesota Vikings is $6,000. Diggs, having been banged up, had a couple of quiet weeks prior to last week's bye for the Vikings. Get a tough assignment this week against a good Eagles pass defence that ranks 5th in DVOA, but we've seen in the first 2 weeks of the season what Stephon Diggs can do, and at $6,000 he's well worth rostering as the main weapon in the passing game for the undefeated Vikings. If a decent enough Vikings offensive line can give Bradford time, then he could expose the cornerbacks of Philadelphia, which I do think are weaker, certainly than most others in the NFC East, by Diggs. He could get his 3rd 100-yard game of the season this year. A touchdown would be nice too, but Diggs is one of those, he's just cheaper than you expect this week. And wide receiver Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for 7,800. Evans was assumed #1 status in Tampa, saw his targets and production increase in the absence of Vincent Jackson last year. The same can be expected again this year now that Jackson has hit injured reserve. Evans has already seen double-digit targets every game since week 1, with a season high of 18 a couple of weeks ago. He's scored a touchdown in every single game except the clash with the Denver Broncos, averaging over 20 fantasy points per game this season. And I'm expecting those numbers to take a bump up from this point on as well. So I think if you can work AJ Green and Mike Evans into your lineups, I think that's a very, very solid starting point. Looking at tight ends this week, Vernon Davis of the Washington Redskins for 2,900. With Jordan Reed missing this game again, Davis should get the start at tight end against a porous Lions defence that struggles mightily to cover the tight end position. In a game that profiles potentially as a shootout, Davis has got huge upside in tournaments at a very decent bargain price for us. And Hunter Henry of the San Diego Chargers for 3,600. Rookie Henry has emerged in the absence of Gates through injury earlier this year. He's remained part of the offense since the veteran returned as well. He does seem to have gained the trust of Phillip Rivers with 8 targets last week. He's a red zone weapon with a touchdown in each of his last 3 games. Atlanta do historically struggle to defend the tight end position as well, so there could be a heavy dosage of both Antonio Gates and Hunter Henry for the San Diego Chargers this week. And looking at defense and special teams, the Baltimore Ravens unit for 2,800. The Ravens do struggle a little bit to defend the pass. The Jets have got solid wide receivers. Fortunately, though, Geno Smith is in at quarterback for the Jets this week, and that can only be good news for Baltimore, as he looked as suspect as he used to when in for Fitzpatrick in prime time on Monday. Baltimore stopped the run better than any other team in the league. The Jets' run game has been struggling anyway, so this game for New York is in the hands of Geno. Geno, give me some of the Ravens' defense, please, at this price. That's what I'm going to be using in my daily fantasy lineups this week. Please like the video, do subscribe to my channel, give me a follow on Twitter at dansports.tips. Let me know in the comments who you'll be using in your lineups, what you think is going to happen in the games this weekend. Please do not forget to tweet me pictures of any lineups you have success with using these players on Twitter. Best of luck with your lineups. See you next week.